Welcome to Parallel Lives. I'm Dimmer, and this is my co-host Levi.
Hello.
Today we're going to talk about the Daydreamers mini documentary, directed by Thomas Renckens.
It was only available on Vimeo, right?
Yeah, it's part of a film festival. The film festival made it available for the week that it was showing. Talking about that with us today is Bailey.
Thanks for having me. Some great work that they put together on this short film.
I don't know how many of our audience actually got the chance to see it while it was available.
I sent it to a few people out there, so yeah, a lot of people actually had very interesting opinions on it. They all mentioned that it was quite emotional, and some of them had to take some breaks in between just because it was quite heavy. But hey, hopefully a few people at least saw it.
I heard some people were crying their way through it, so really touched them.
Yeah, I cried.
Yeah.
Let's start right there, right at the beginning. Okay. Just off the cuff, first impressions. Did you like it? Did you not like it?
Yeah, well, I loved it, but I think it's quite sobering. It's quite a moment to sort of see this journey where two, these individuals that we can all kind of relate to in some way go through this, and it's sort of looking in a mirror in some way. So it felt quite heavy for me when I was watching it because you know I know that it must be very hard for them to go through with this, and you see the sort of transition with them. They're sort of anxious in the start, and you can almost feel their emotions whenever they're sharing it with Eli Summer. So yeah, I thought it was quite a very heavy thing to watch. I didn't cry. I did feel. Well, I actually felt like very close to it at one stage, but yeah, it was quite. I it's heavy stuff to watch. That's what I have to say.
What about you, Levi?
Uh, I really do agree with Bailey. It was it was quite a lot heavier than I expected it to be. Right, I think I saw the trailer for it a while back, and I think it was on Somer's channel, on his YouTube channel, and I remember thinking, this would make a pretty cool, like, full documentary type of thing, but thinking about it back then, I didn't think that it would hit that close to home or be that personal. And the way I see it is that's you can see it was made for a film festival because it's done in such an artistic way that just portrays emotion just in its rawest form. And my takeaway from it was just that it's quite interesting to see this thing, maladaptive daydreaming, being displayed, well, not being displayed, but being spoken about by people who, talk about how tough they have it, as opposed to seeing it online and seeing a variety of different uh, different people's experiences and different experiences and things like that. So yeah, it was quite. I'd say it brought me down to earth with maladaptive daydreaming itself, and just really just understanding how big of a deal it actually is that I never thought about. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. You see sort of the effect that it had on their actual lives, sort of on relationships, things like that. And it's something that we see in the community, like in kind of text form, like but we don't really see it visually. We don't see anyone sit down and just face to the camera sort of talk about it. So I think that form of really seeing it, it's so raw. It feels so honest, like very almost like brutal way of anyone who can relate to that. It's very hard hitting.
I kind of want to follow that thread there of the tone of it. So the introduction, And really the whole thing, all the way through, really reminds me of like Scandinavian supernatural mystery TV series that like I watch on Netflix.
That's very specific.
I know, but as it came up, I was like, wow, this could be like the opening titles to like Katla or Equinox or Fortitude.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
or even like Dark or Les Revenants, you know? I love those shows. But I can see how most people that I've come across, I feel like I'm going off on a tangent here, but most people that I've come across have really loved the documentary, but I did run into one person on Reddit who was pissed
Really?
because yeah, because they felt like the filmmaker had specifically chosen creepy and unsettling imagery to
Right.
really make these people seem unhinged. But I very much did not get that impression. Maybe because I watch a lot of those weird shows where it's ethereal and otherworldly, but not creepy. But if you are creeped out by otherworldly things, I guess I could see how you would get that impression. But like, what impression did you guys get from it? How do you feel about like the tone and the imagery?
No, I have thoughts to say on that. I didn't see that whatsoever. I think I don't know how you could come to that sort of conclusion. I mean, that's a little bit off the intention of the film, isn't it? I mean, it's literally what they have said. It's not scripted or. I mean, I assume that they're sort of talking about the kind of imagery that would come in between the scenes where you could see the this sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, this sort of like liquidy cloud thing that was going on. Like I don't know how you could use that to bring down the entire film, but you know, I think that I would advise someone who thought that to just rewatch it again and sort of open their mind. You know, it's not really, complicated. It's simple. you know, it's it's not scripted as to what I seen. It was a quite basic, personal experience that two people were sharing. And I think that they're looking at it from like an entertainment point of view. They're sort of like it's too mystical. But I mean, yeah, I'm not really sure how. If someone could try and explain that one to me, I really don't follow how someone got that perspective. But anyway, yeah. Anyone have another point of view on that one?
I mean, I don't understand that either, but I will agree that the overall emotion behind it. I think the film was intentionally made to just be emotional, because the audience will react or will relate to something that is emotional, as opposed to, let's say we take out all of the music that's kind of like, has this emotional aesthetic and this somber feeling, and replace it with something else, then that would change the whole feel of the documentary itself, and maybe people just wouldn't relate to that, so I
Mm.
feel that, yeah, I get I don't get it, but I understand that people wouldn't understand why it's so dark and, like, well, not dark, but heavy. Like, it's
Right.
it's quite a serious documentary. Like I said, I didn't expect it to be that hard hitting, I can almost say, but I really was made for a film festival. Emotion is very highly regarded for something like this, especially when it has to do with something like mental health, which isn't really taken seriously, at this stage in the medical, psychological, or psychology industries or profession worlds, whatever you want to call it. So, I think this film, yes, it was a bit dramatic, but I really feel like it was necessary to bring out the point that they're making, that this is a serious thing. This is something that is really ruining people's lives, and that's making it a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I see what I know what you're saying, and I think the work that these researchers and professors do, it's very important, and it's really giving us sort of like this window into what's going on and how these people are working, and we can see as well. One thing is it can help break down this wall that we have of how we think it's going to go when we seek sort of therapy, or whatever we see, that's whatever sort of nightmare we see, worst case scenario. It's like it's confronting us in that way, and I think it's a I know what I got from it was it's like we need to sort of, I think we can learn from Agatha and Jessica just in taking responsibility for, like, looking after ourselves, sort of negotiating our way to a better position in life, which is something I've written down here. So I think of yeah, something I was thinking is MD is like, it's sort of like a big plane, and it's flying in the middle of a fleet of other planes, if you would, and we'll call it like an air force of our problems, and or the enemy air force. We aren't equipped to take them out. We can't just take MD straight on, but we can sort of perhaps look at something else, some other smaller plane, we'll say. And this is where sort of this a therapist would come in, sort of as our advisor or our strategist. And they don't say shoot straight at the MD, go for the smaller ones, go for the triggers, the things that are refueling the planes, so we can keep them on the ground for longer. It's a bit of a visual picture going on in my head, but uh, yeah, I just thought, it helps us see what goes on in these rooms between a therapist. Even though Eli Summer's not a therapist, we can sort of understand, I don't know, the chemistry or how it works. And that's something I got out of it. I think that they set a good example in taking their mental health seriously.
Yeah, and just something else to add to that, something that's also really important in this documentary is it showcases how difficult it is to talk about this thing, especially talking to, talking to Eli Somer. He understands MD and he understands, what's difficult about it and all that type of stuff. But imagine speaking to a therapist or a doctor who isn't educated in MD, like it would be quite difficult to get the message across without feeling like we're sounding absolutely crazy. And
Hmm.
I feel like this documentary really, it showcased that well. How anxious it makes people to just talk about it because it's so, yeah, it's such a heavy thing, to have.
Just actually said something about that I wrote down. She, the director Thomas had asked her, do you feel ashamed of your daydreaming? And her answer was, yeah, because I never really understood what it was. I was like, that's it right there. Like,
Hmm.
before you know what MD is, or even after you do, but you still don't really understand it. It's just hard to talk about. You can't talk about it without sounding
Yeah,
weird or crazy or I don't even know what words to use here because even those ones aren't quite right. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's like you need a whole new language to be able
Mm,
to tell somebody and get your point across in an understandable way.
yeah, that's true. I'll say it as something that happened to me. Speaking on this because it's quite relevant, is I actually said about my MD to my doctor, like, do you know your normal general practice doctor? And I just brought it up, and I was like, it's kind of this thing I've been doing since I've been a child or whatever. But it was just weird because I was trying to explain it to her, but she couldn't fathom, she couldn't understand. I mean, it wasn't that she was asking important questions, but it was, I know what it's like, on that. It was a weird conversation. And I felt weird when I left the room because it's like, it's weird when your doctor has no idea what something is. So I understand that.
Yeah, even now, even just with friends, like I just walk away from every conversation feeling like I did not explain that well. They have the complete wrong impression. Oh my God. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry. I just remembered something. So I told my sister about MD a couple of years ago, explained it to her. And then a few months ago, she texted me. She is a dog trainer. And somebody had sent her an article about training service dogs to sense when someone with DID is going to switch. For what purpose, I'm not entirely sure, but she was asking me about it. She's like, you know about this stuff. And I was like, well, no, I don't know anything about DID. And she's like, through the conversation, I finally realized that for the past 2 years, my sister thought I had told her that I have dissociative identity disorder. My sister thought I had DID for the past 2 years. I don't know anything about DID. All I did was explain MD to her, and she somehow landed on the completely wrong thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about missing the point.
I feel like that, it happens a lot, especially with, let's say people read some stuff online about something like DID, or, what else can MD be confused with? Let's say fantasy proness or something like that. And then, when you explain MD to people, they don't, like, they get it, but they don't really get it on that personal level, and that also brings me back to the documentaries that I feel like I wish I could hear more people's opinions who aren't maladaptive daydreamers, when they watch the documentary, because people who do watch it, us as maladaptive daydreamers, for us, we understood exactly what these interviewees, if I can call them that, what they went through, and what they're talking about. So, talking to other people, it's weird, man. Like, even so I when I get certain daydreams, my head will repeat them over and over and over again until I draw them out, like in a comic style. And I've shared some of them with a friend of mine who might also have MD, and I just always cringe so hard at it. And it's like, how can I talk to anyone when I feel like this just looking at my own daydreams and stuff like that? So when it comes to this documentary, there's this, I don't know, I just there's just this relatability to everything that people said. So I feel like, again, it was really necessary to have that in that, to showcase how difficult it was to just talk about, this whole thing, to have MD.
I think that's one of the core sort of things that I got out of it, is just relating to trying to articulate yourself to somebody about, you know, what it is. Yeah. And it is hard, as I was talking there about. I was doing that there a week and a half ago. Somebody who didn't have a clue what was going on. But yeah, I think it's definitely, yeah. I'm glad that this came out. It's definitely a brilliant short film from the start.
For someone, I am wondering that too. I am wondering what someone who doesn't have MD would walk away feeling from this. Because, I mean, I definitely feel like they would probably walk away with, like, oh my God, I didn't know daydreaming could do that. But, who knows? Would they, like that one person on Reddit said, would they walk away thinking, like, wow, these people are unhinged? Or oh, this is a new friggin' snowflake disease. It's nothing. Like, I haven't talked to any non-MDers about what they got out of this film. Is it, I will ask this, is it a film that you would show to someone you were trying to like explain your experience to? Would you show this to your mother or your boyfriends or your girlfriends or anything like that?
That's a good question. I don't know really. I don't really have an answer to that. I have a feeling that because they are examples that aren't exactly in line with like my particular experience, because we all have different things. I would feel like maybe not, because I don't want them to think, like there were certain quotes in there, like you spend half your day, half your waking hours daydreaming. Like, I think that compared to me, like I wouldn't spend to that. What I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a hard question to. I mean, yeah, I've never really thought about that actually.
I probably, well, I guess, I'm very open about having maladaptive daydreaming, even, towards strangers online, because I don't really care what people think. But I guess, when it comes to personal relationships, it's a lot different. I would love for the public to see this and get more educated on MD and what it is and stuff like that. But I feel like if I had to explain maladaptive daydreaming to people who are closer to me, like let's say family, maybe to some family, but I feel like it also depends on the person themselves and whether I know that they will take the time to understand or not. Because I feel like, like Dimmer mentioned, some people will probably think, okay, great, well, now daydreaming is a problem, or, they would be willfully ignorant about it. And I feel like, sure, they can watch it, but, what's the point going to be in that? I'd rather let people watch it who I feel could definitely take something away from that. Like, if I were in a relationship, then and my partner didn't understand me, then I would probably let them watch that if they would like to. Um, but yeah, I guess it really depends on the person whether I feel like they will truly take something away from the film or whether they would just feel like it's complete, dramatized nonsense. So yeah, but again, I feel like this, the public should watch this just for the sake of education. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I would go more of the simpler route whenever if I was to tell anyone. It would be more of a like keep it really basic, don't go into any details. Definitely not a short film anyway. But I don't think I would go down the route of that. But I mean, there's just so much to unpack in that, to somebody who doesn't really understand maladaptive daydreaming. So
I feel like sometimes it's better to rather, let's say you were to talk about MD with someone anyway. I always feel like it would be better to personally talk to them face to face than to send them to watch a documentary because or a short form because it depends on their what they're doing at the time, whether they're paying attention, whether they want to watch it, all that type of stuff. Where if there's a personal connection or if we're sitting face to face or even on a Discord call, something like that, I feel like that's a lot more personal because then they can also ask questions and they can be more engaged. So uh
yeah,
maybe not. I guess it depends. So yeah.
yeah, I think that's always the preferred one, isn't it? Just sort of uh face to face. Then they can just
Yeah.
ask any question that comes to mind rather than leave them with all these sort of different ideas. You know.
Yeah, I feel like I would definitely show this to strangers, but
Mm.
I wouldn't show it to the people close to me mostly because I don't want to answer their questions. And because of how like heavy and somber and emotional it is, they're going to be weird prying questions. My husband hasn't even seen this. Like I've been talking about this documentary for oh god, how long has he been making it? For like over a year. And it's finally out, and I've been talking about it like all week, and he hasn't even asked to watch it, and I have not asked him to watch it because I don't want him to ask me any weird questions after.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. I forgot about, like people will probably ask a lot of probably intrusive questions, because people aren't they don't know a whole lot, they don't really know, what is okay to ask and what's not. But yeah, like you mentioned, some of those questions can get quite personal and intrusive, like I know the one question that a lot of people they either hate or love is, so what do you daydream about? And it's like, ah man, like I don't want to tell you what I daydream about, homie. Like, so
The worst
yeah.
question.
Some people just don't want to talk about it.
I think that segues really nice into like talking about Jess and Agatha as people because they are so different. Like Agatha was up there talking about the content of her daydreams, and Jess didn't mention it once. I think she mentioned it once in that she said, it's very personal and I'm not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So which one do you think you would be more, Agatha or Jessica?
I am Jess, like all the way. I actually wrote things down about Jess because our experience is so similar. Like we both had two sisters and a brother. and shared our room with our sisters, so I would go into the bathroom. I mean, I was famous for super long showers and stealing all the hot water just because I'd take a couple of showers, super long showers a day, just for some friggin' privacy because I had two sisters all up in my space all the goddamn time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. We just seem to have a lot in common. She's not in her daydreams either. Neither am I. I can't really relate to people who are in their daydreams like Agatha is, where she's the protagonist. It's just not how I daydream. It's not my experience. But I definitely saw myself in Jess.
Yeah. I think I would probably fall into that more than Agatha anyway. Personally, like, um, although I'm I'm not specific on those details in terms of like the bathroom, but I don't I don't camp out there. But yeah, I do. I thought it was interesting at one point in there where she said she was quite known for it. Like she would be in they made like birthday cake or something that was shaped like a toilet. I don't know if you got I don't know if you got that out of it, did you?
Yeah, I heard her say that.
Yeah, that's quite like wow. That's really does. She must have been in there for quite some time. I mean, I have to say, I would be sort of any sort of privacy. I would fall into that, but probably more in my own room.
For me, I would say both, and I'll explain why, but a little more do I relate to Agatha because at one stage she spoke about, well, firstly, the whole she is the protagonist in her daydreams and stuff like that, and I relate to that. But at one stage she spoke about this one guy who she really, really liked, and she dragged him into her daydreams, and then with time, she was daydreaming about him so much that he eventually just became like a ghost or a shell of his original self, to the version of him in her mind was way different to what he really was. And I I feel like I relate to that a lot because I drag, well, not people, but I drag characters into my daydreams and they just become so incredibly out of character, it's just they're not their original selves anymore. And eventually, it's like, well, then, do I really like this character as they are? Or do I change them to fit what I want them to be? And I feel like that relates to a lot of people's, the characters or the paras or the people that they have in their daydreams, including themselves. And I really relate to that. It's just I feel like I've I've become very alienated from myself just because I'm always this other person, but then in the real world, I'm like not happy at all, you know? So I definitely relate to her on that the most. But also what Jessica said about the loneliness that it creates, that is something that I definitely 100% also take away from, relating to that because yeah, when we live in our minds, well, me personally, I don't go out and socialize because I it makes me so tired. So I prefer to just sit in my room and just be occupied in my daydreams, be social in my daydreams, and that's it adds to the loneliness. It adds to not being out there and getting that socialization and stuff. So yeah, just in short, that's why I relate to both of them. But I think overall, mostly I would relate to Agatha. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. That sort of reminded me. I don't know about this study that was put out yesterday about how these your kind of types of daydreams will fall into um specific I don't know how to say it, like personality traits. I thought it was interesting. I don't know, you probably didn't look into it because it's only been out there very recently, but I thought it was pretty detailed on that. And I was reading it there yesterday about how you can create people in daydreams and how it seems to correlate with separation insecurity, which is quite interesting. Sort of about I would say anyone who's listening, it's definitely worth looking into or looking into that study. Like it sort of breaks down, your content in your daydreams into sort of like your personality traits. Yeah, am I the only one who's looked at that, or has anyone else had a chance to?
I did read through it. I read this study.
Mm.
Um, but I didn't dedicate the time to it that I need to like really understand a study. Because I'm not particularly an academic. So like I need to when I read a study, I actually have to look up the terms, and I didn't do that with this one. I did read it, but I like did not look up what exactly they mean by
Yeah,
um
whatever. So yeah,
yeah, by the separation thing, by anhedonia, by oh, what was the third one? Yeah.
narcissistic grandiosity as well. That's a big word.
That's what it was, narcissistic grandiosity. And I wonder how they landed on those 3. Like, it's probably in the notes somewhere why those 3 in particular were chosen, but I feel that, there's probably gotta be more personality types and stuff that just didn't get covered in this study.
Yeah, I think you're right. And as well, I was wondering, you know, because I was looking towards the end of the study actually, and I seen 77% of the candidates were female. So I wonder if there's some kind of psychological difference between male and female that perhaps could influence the outcome of that. Maybe I don't know. Would you think that could be something? Because it doesn't seem to be covered. I don't know.
Usually, they adjust for variables between things like that, like gender and sex and socioeconomic status and things like that. They'll
Okay.
adjust for them. But I don't know if you have a study that is so overwhelmingly one gender over the other. I don't know if you can adjust for that or if you just need to do another study with a bunch of men.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I was thinking because I think one of the main differences is like males seem to have more of an interest in things. Like my daydreams seem to be more about things, whereas I see now this is not like I'm not a scientist, but I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts on this. Whereas seems to be that women have more of an interest in people, and that's apparently something some psychologists found. So I was wondering, is this something that's sort of factored into these personality things that they're thinking of? Because I mean, when you have 77% female and maybe they seem to be more, I don't know, I've never properly, I just thought, is there anything out there about this, about the fact that maybe these that sort of gender can play a swing maybe in the results of these studies.
Gender bias in psychology, in the medical field, has it is its own massive topic that has very detrimental in a lot of ways, impacts on the real world. ADHD, for example, uh, primarily diagnosed in boys. There are so many girls who are only being diagnosed now as adults, and more girls are getting diagnosed younger because the default was male, and because women presented differently, or young girls, I think at the time they weren't really looking at adults. They just got skated over, and the same thing with heart attacks. 50% of the entire population of the world is women, but our heart attack symptoms are completely different, and they just sort of get ignored and brushed off, and they're only more recently, is awareness spreading about how heart attack symptoms are different in women. Like, gender bias is its whole topic that is so much bigger than maladaptive daydreaming. And maladaptive daydreaming is just one more spot where it's showing up. And why is it showing up there? Like, I think there's 1,000 reasons, but I think most of it probably comes down to how we're socialized. It's easier for women to talk about and seek help for stuff like this. So we're getting overrepresented in maladaptive daydreaming.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we might see a study come out on that in the future. Like, yeah, I mean, because even when I was watching the short film, like, and I seem to notice. Well, I know with Agatha, I don't want to generalize anyone and say like she represents, most maladaptive daydreamers, but there seems to be a theme of like people and you know maybe it falls into the separation insecurity H2 whatever it is on this study, but yeah, that's interesting with gender bias that you were saying there.
I kind of want to bring attention to. I think there was. I can't remember if it was one or two people, but I do know that there's at least, uh, yeah, like one or two other men who are YouTubers, and they also have like the characters and things like that. I don't know if they would like to be mentioned here, but I'm actually very interested in this study because, you know, as you guys were talking, I was thinking, yeah, it would have actually been nice to just have some men on this film as well, hear their experiences and things like that. Um, but overall, I feel like it just depends on, like Dimmer said, the way people are socialized and how they're raised, what exactly caused their MD, what they are seeking in life. I think there definitely be similarities, but I feel like there is a bit of a problem where not a lot of men are being, open about this whole thing or asked about it. And that is actually something that I wish we could get more of, like thinking about in the film, it would have been nice to also hear from some men as interviewees, I mean.
Yeah, maybe it's a stigma or something that's out there about mental health. People still needs to be addressed, whereas I think I don't know, maybe I'm just off on this, but I think like women have been very more proactive in sort of mental health, and there's a lot more women in sort of that I don't know sector, you'd say, like health and care. So I don't know, maybe it's down to that. Yeah, it's I don't know, like sharing feelings or something like that with a man is sort of a stigmatized still, so it's harder to come out with whatever you're struggling with.
I can say that I spoke to my dad about having maladaptive daydreaming, and he never heard about it. And when I spoke to him about it, he said he has exactly the same thing. So he has MD as well, but, and this is what stuck with me, he made it absolutely clear that he despises it. And as soon as he starts daydreaming, he just keeps himself busy with something in reality, to stop his mind from, as he called it, creating these movies in his mind. So, and my dad doesn't talk about stuff like this. So I feel like, it maybe it really does lend to that, because putting myself in a perspective, of today's society, there is still a lot of pressure where if I go out and I tell people, hey, I have these fictional relationships or fictional interactions with fictional characters in my mind, yeah, I don't think it's that easy, for me, maybe because I just don't care what people think, but I feel like in general, like you mentioned, I don't think men really talk about this stuff. But yeah, it's just an interesting observation. But I was just thinking about the way that my dad explained it, how he just absolutely hates it. So it might be something like that, where it's just something that people don't know that it's MD. They just think that they have a very creative mind.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you said your dad has it because I didn't know that there was this sort of thing going on. I didn't realize that you could have sort of genetic passing on of MD. Is that a thing? Is it or
There was in one study, I remember that I don't know if Dimmer can help me out here, but I know that in one study they said that it is a possibility for it to be genetic, but I can't remember whether that was just a suggestion or whether it was actually tested on, like, not tested, but I mean, uh, how do you say that? Like, they got people in with the genetic thing, so yeah.
It's a suggestion. It's a possibility. There are conditions that are a million times more thoroughly studied than MD that still don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think we'll get an answer anytime soon, but anecdotally, I think I get it from my dad too.
Yeah.
really? Wow. Seriously. So do you have someone in your family as well who has MD or
No, or I mean, at least not that I'm aware of. My sister has some of the traits, but she doesn't seem bothered by it, so she might, have the daydreaming trait, but not the maladaptive part. And my dad, we just don't talk about things like that. He shows what I see and interpret as signs of it, but I don't know. I've never asked him, and I never would ask him, so I'll never be certain.
yeah, that's interesting. Maybe I should keep my eye on my own family. Start investigating people. Um, so yeah, that study was interesting anyway. I know I'm sort of struggling to actually, if I'm honest, I find it hard looking at this thing because it's like it seems like I cross two, like H2 and H1, which is separation, insecurity, and narcissistic grandiosity. But like I don't feel the narcissistic like maybe it's there and I don't know, it's definitely given me loads of things to think about anyway. Like I just like I don't know if you looked at that study and you went, yeah, I definitely have anhedonia or whatever, like I didn't feel the yeah, that describes me perfectly, if you know what I mean.
I read it, but I didn't like attend to it closely. I don't recall seeing myself in it though, because a lot of what I read about other maladaptive daydreaming experiences is how people see themselves in their daydreams, and a lot of conversation around how people view their idolized self and what impact that has on them and what it might mean about them. But I'm not in my daydreams.
Hmm.
So I just don't understand it at all. I don't see myself in those.
You're not present in your own daydreams, like you don't see yourself in them.
No, and neither does Jess, which is another reason I loved Jessica so much in this documentary.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's strange. No, I mean, because I was thinking like that's very weird because well, I was actually watching some. I was listening to another podcast actually, and it was about sleep, and it was about how it was actually about the consciousness, like what exactly is consciousness. And they were saying about even when we fall asleep in our dreams, we're still dreaming from our own perspective. So it's like we're even conscious to a certain extent when we're asleep. But then it's like when I hear all this stuff, like people have these daydreams where they are not themselves, it's like, well, doesn't that kind of contradict with literal, like how we think consciousness works? Because we literally aren't, I don't know, I don't know if I'm articulating this right, but it doesn't seem to follow how people think about themselves. I think it's a good indicator that maybe, like Agatha said, that there's like this wall down inside of her, and maybe whenever you're, I don't know, daydreaming and you're not seeing it from your own sort of perspective, maybe that's like the split in consciousness because you're not exactly conscious in a way, in like a yeah, I don't know. It just conflicts with everything I've learned about that. Like, I don't know. I actually don't know what to think of that. I really don't. Like,
I think it was Agatha who mentioned that. Uh, I think she spoke about the amount of time that just disappears when she's daydreaming. And I feel like, on that topic, we daydream about the things that we want, like the things that we desire. Maybe not consciously, maybe subconsciously, but I feel like, when we daydream, we just lose track of time so much because we're getting stuff that we want that we don't have. Uh, Although I might be wrong on some fronts, but that's just how I feel and how I see it. And that's also why I relate to Agatha is because in her mentioning how much time just wastes away thinking about these things, it's quite difficult and confusing and frustrating, but I feel like, again, that's what the film portrays is just how MD is this wonderful thing that just ruins your life at the same time, it's crazy, but I feel like it was necessary to portray.
So even though I saw myself more in Jess, there was Agatha's so much more quotable. there's there's a lot of things she said that like really resonated with me, and one of them that I had made note of. I think it. So you had mentioned this before, Levi, but I had a different takeaway from it. She said, "I'm not looking for him anymore. He's like a ghost. He's not a person." And I know that she was talking literally. She's just trying to get across that it's not actually him. This isn't some sort of lovesick obsession. He's just basically a face claim, I guess, to borrow a term from fan fiction.
Yeah.
But I feel like that quote just describes all of MD
Yeah.
from my experience. Like I'm not looking for that anymore. I'm not looking for that thing that I'm missing anymore. Maybe I was as a child when I developed this, maybe even as a teenager, but now as an adult, I am beyond that. And my MD itself is just a ghost that is still haunting me and, sort of tearing down my life. But the thing that was there, it's not there anymore.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, it sort of served its purpose, and it's something that I don't know, you feel isn't as necessary. Like maybe your, I don't know, situation has improved and it's, it seems like it doesn't need to be there like in your life. But I think that's where maybe it becomes more compulsive, maybe. more like I don't know, or maybe obsessive, sort of similar, rather than being like a thing to that you need. It becomes a thing that you sort of have to do, like, and it's like you're left with the, I don't know, structure of it. So you've sort of like deconstructed the whole thing over time, but then there's sort of like this, I don't know, main spine of it left that's going to be there, and you sort of you're still, even though you don't need that, you just keep revisiting it.
Yeah, exactly. And I will okay, so there's one thing that I don't like about this documentary. And that's the end, the very end where Agatha and Jess sit down and they're talking to each other. And most of that is okay, but I just wish I could have seen more of what they said to each other. But it's only a 30-minute documentary, so maybe in the next one, right? But the film kind of concludes with Agatha saying to Jessica, basically what she says is, well, maybe we need to learn to love ourselves or something. And it's just,
Yeah, it's the beginning of an evolution. Yeah, I remember.
yeah. And I don't know. I was just kind of like, oh, it all comes down to love yourself. Like, meh. I love you, Thomas. I love you, Thomas Renckens. If you're listening, I do, and I love the documentary. But because I find myself in this position where I do love myself. Like I don't have a huge amount of self-esteem issues. Y-
Mm.
like I said before, like all that stuff that I was looking for that got me addicted to this in the first place, it's gone. It's resolved for the most part, but I'm left with the compulsion.
Adding to that, I didn't even think about it, but you know, some people will have more self-esteem issues than others, but at the end of the day, maladaptive daydreaming, we can love ourselves even with MD, of course, but and we can accept each other, we can accept ourselves. But the problem is that MD is still very destructive or disruptive, rather, and that is the problem. Like it's not, in my opinion, it's not about loving yourself. It's about it's more about being content with what we have in the real world and overcoming this thing that just doesn't seem to want to get out of our minds. It's difficult. So yeah, that's also my bit of criticism. I do feel that they meant it in a good way, not like in a condescending, or just love yourself, bro, like not something like that. But I do feel that, the message is, it needs to be a bit more deeper than just accept yourself or love yourself, because MD is like a thing of its own, if I
Yeah,
can put it that way.
yeah. I kind of can go on with that actually. 'Cause, I noticed like in the community, sort of on Reddit and so on, is people seem to be a bit obsessed with like curing. I was after daydreaming. How can I cure this? Has anyone been cured? Do you know anyone who's been cured? But I'm like, I don't know if we should be focusing on sort of that. I think it's just about getting, our lives to work, like really just tackling how it affects our lives rather than thinking about curing MD. I don't know what you think about that, but that sort of came to my mind. Is sort of thinking about, you know, what it's affecting, like kind of our lives, trying to I don't know, stabilize that rather than cure MD. Do you know what I mean?
We often talk about this on our episodes, actually, when we talk about the curing and treatment. Is you know, a lot of people seem to want a cure, but the point is, with MD, daydreaming is normal. Almost
Mm,
everyone just has normal daydreaming. So why would you want to cure it completely? We just sort of want treatment to cope with it better in life. So we still want the daydreaming. We just want to get rid of the maladaptive part of it. The part that
Yeah.
interferes with our lives.
I suppose it's in the name, maladaptive, isn't it? I think that means sort of
Yeah.
disruptive. It's so I mean we've got to take the maladaptive out of it, but not the daydreaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's you have to address it like so many other things, like ADHD, like OCD. There's not you don't cure those. You just don't wake up one day and they're gone. But
Yeah.
there are things that you can do to manage them and have a happy, full life while living with them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not to say that some people can't. I don't know if you'd say cure it. I'm sure some people can just, I don't know, exercise some sort of control over it and regain themselves. But I mean, I don't know. I think, it's all about sort of, um, yeah, as you said, just sort of living your actual life, trying to get it to work, trying to understand what your goals are and how it affects what your goals are.
I wanted to actually just it's sort of similar, but also a different note. So Cora, who is an audience member, they said that Jess also mentioned that she kind of projects herself onto her characters. And, as she mentioned, a part of herself which is louder and more outspoken and quite hard to get out. I feel like, coming back to this whole thing where I made a little animation about this a while back where it's like the me in my mind is way more spontaneous and outspoken and loud and having a lot more fun than the version of me in real life. And I feel like that also links to the whole thing where I really truly enjoy these daydreams, but it's just that interference and getting rid of that interference takes a lot of work, getting rid of the maladaptive part of it. And I know that I'm going on this whole tangent, but as we can see in the documentary, is just uh, talking to people and getting the word out there about maladaptive daydreaming, being comfortable to take the next steps and stuff like that. All of it makes a difference, but it's still it's not that easy. It's still very, very difficult. So that's just the whole loop that I wanted to make and bring back to the whole, just
Yeah.
accept yourself, love yourself, that type of stuff, relating to getting a cure, getting treatment, and all that type of stuff. But yeah, I feel like the one thing that this documentary really showcased was just how how weird it is to cope with this thing. Like in our minds, we're one version. Like I usually explain to people, real life doesn't feel real to me. It feels like a simulation, where my daydreams feel exceptionally real to me personally. And seeing this documentary kind of makes you realize just how personal MD can get, and that's why it's so difficult to just cure it or to just you know accept it or stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that sounds like Jessica, actually, what you were mentioning before.
I did note that both of them mentioned the crash. They didn't call it the crash, but they both talked about it. Um, Jess had said it. She started talking about this vicious circle and being hit with the reality that you haven't done anything. And Agatha was talking about walking down the street and you realize you can't enjoy and you can't be in your own life and you feel like you're dead. And I don't know if maybe in a longer documentary, I would like to see that talked about a little more, the crash, the, juxtaposition. Because I get those dissociative sort of symptoms too, where the world feels like feels like a painting. It feels like I'm in a painting, and it's really weird. It's temporary. It goes away. I don't have a dissociative disorder in that sense. I just get these temporary symptoms after like daydreaming a lot. But it's really really hard to like reconcile reality with you.
Hmm. Yeah. How do you think that might affect sort of when you're socializing with other people? Because I mean, when you're on that deep of a level, sort of confused about like your own reality, and then you're trying to be someone that's like, you know, you want to be a good friend or whatever, and then at the same time you're wondering, is reality a painting? You know, I kind of a similar, yeah, I could kind of relate on that, and I felt in socializing, it sort of affected myself. I think most MDers can sort of relate in some way. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not a good friend. Or wasn't. I've actually part of like my recovery process is being more social and putting myself in reality more, and it's going well. I am rebuilding social networks. I have friends um, that like me. You know, we like to spend time together, but it's taken me a while to get there because for a long time I just wasn't a good friend because I didn't want to go anywhere with anyone and do anything, and I wouldn't listen when they were talking to me. I was only ever half present, and uh, them asking me to do things I just found annoying because I'd rather be in my room daydreaming, you know? And people feel that. They feel that you're irritated with them for no
Yeah.
goddamn reason. So yeah, it definitely affects you socially. Even if you are social, like you're not putting the version of yourself out that you would like to.
Yeah. It's weird because I'm almost the opposite in that way. Is like, and I think you were saying you sort of don't want to be socializing. You have to sort of push yourself. Whereas like with me, it's like I sort of want. I don't know. I don't know how to put it into words, but it's like you value that quite highly, being socially, just having really good social abilities, being able to make friends, all that sort of stuff. Like I value that quite high, like very highly, but like I'm not able to exactly execute that. So in a way, it's like a terrible circle of like, I want to be like this person, but then when I'm actually there, it's like there's this sort of, it doesn't really form in reality. But like in my head, like I wanna I kind of want to have the like really good friends. And I do have these sort of daydreamish things about like what like the best friendship would be, if you know what I mean. Uh, and I'm like, it could be quite specific on someone like that I know. But like when I'm there in reality, it's like I don't know how to become that person. It's like it's sort of not able to come out. And then I'm aware of that, which makes it even worse in the situation. I don't know. It's interesting that it's almost like not almost like the opposite in a way, because I like want to be there, but socially it's like I'm not exactly able to carry that, I don't know, ability or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if you can relate to that, or at least Levi, but it's maybe more of a niche thing in MD.
I can definitely relate to that. And that's, what I mentioned earlier with what Jess said is that it's such a lonely thing. It's well, I throw around the term loneliness a lot. Uh, it might not uh, a lot of people might not agree with me, or they might not have this issue, but for me personally, that's something that really stood out to me. What she said was this this part of her which she just feels so damn lonely because in her mind she has all of these socializations, these relationships, all that type of stuff. Or that was Agatha. But both of them just mentioning it's a lonely thing to go through. And like you said, I personally can relate to that whole thing of wanting really good friends and wanting like that best friend forever, and just having people there, but then in real life, it's yeah, I'm so awkward, and I'm completely the opposite. And I feel like that's another thing, that just weighs you down as a maladaptive daydreamer. You keep seeing what you want to see, what you want yourself to be, but then when you try to apply it to real life, you realize that it's not that easy. It's actually extremely difficult to be this idealized version that we have, of what we want in our minds and stuff like that. Um, but again, each person is different, so it might not apply to everyone. But I feel like, you bringing this topic up and just also talking about it, it's definitely something that I feel like a lot of people can relate to. And that's another thing that hit me quite hard with this film was just, yeah, like it's so difficult to get people to just understand you, right? Like I don't want someone to fix me. I don't want someone to help me through MD. I just want someone to be like, cool, that's who you are. Whatever. Let's go get KFC or something like that. It's just we just want people to understand us. And I feel like that was, to bring this whole thing back full circle, that was the whole point of this documentary, is to just attempt to get people to really understand what we do, how we feel, what's going on in our minds. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was literally thinking of this quote from the film. Is I think Agatha said she got recognition that she's not mad. I think that was like one of the quotes near the end.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I think there's sort of that. You're not crazy.
Yeah, I felt that so hard because I'm not young. I mean, I'm not super old either, don't get me wrong, but I didn't find MD at the age of 15 or even 20. I found it, I was pushing 30 when I found it. Um, and I went through my entire life um, knowing that I was different somehow. I don't know how I came to that conclusion, but I came to it very young. Um, I probably just figured it out naturally through play or something that my friends didn't sort of imagine in the same way I did. So for my entire life, like it was something that I knew not to talk about, but I didn't know what it was. And it was the 80s, it was the early 90s. I didn't know how to find others like me.
Yeah,
I was well into my 20s before maladaptive daydreaming even became something that you could find on the internet. And that whole time, I'm just for years wondering what is wrong with me. And I'm thinking all kinds of stuff. Like, is this a prelude to schizophrenia? Like, is this how schizophrenia manifests before it becomes, full blown? Like just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Or a psychopath. I know that's not a great word to use, but I didn't know. And I wondered about that because my daydreams are very violent. And I thought maybe it meant something about me. And then on the other side, there's like this whole other, like, well, maybe it's not. Maybe everyone is like this. And the problem is me. I am just not capable of coping with something that's perfectly normal for a human to have. I'm lazy, I'm deficient. So all these like conflicting things just making me think there's something wrong with me or that I am crazy. And then I found maladaptive daydreaming and like,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I was just thinking because you know, back like how I came across it was sort of Google, and it was very much in my face. Which I've looked for what the hell was wrong with me in the past before, but I couldn't find anything. And this one time, 2.5 weeks ago, I put it in and I was just hit with it, and then I was like, "Yeah, ticks every box." But like, if that wasn't there, if I wasn't hit with that, I don't know. I just wouldn't have, you know, made that connection. So I'm interested, like, because you wouldn't have had that sort of tool or the community, I assume, to sort of say, yeah, this, I'm one of these. It must be much more different than like my experience of sort of coming across MD. Yeah, yeah.
I think I found it at a time in my life where I was old enough to recognize what it was. I wish I had found it earlier so I didn't have to suffer with thinking that something bad was going to happen to me or thinking that I was crazy for so many years and having that anxiety. But I did find it young enough that there's still something I can do about it in a very real way. Not that if you're older you can't. Like you're never too old to address things. You're never too old to change and have the life that you want. But I think I caught it at a good time, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would do without this, being confronted with it. Yeah, that's something I got out of the short film actually was, the technology actually we see one of the big benefits of in terms of mental health is, like I can speak for that is just, I don't know if I like you were saying back then that I would have come across um maladaptive daydreaming, like I would have gone for years without thinking I was, borderline schizophrenic or something. But yeah, there's thousands of people now uh, sort of turning into the community.
Oh, you know what I just thought of? Okay. Like the opposite of my experience. Um, I just it's so MD is starting to gain awareness. Like there are posts about MD that have gone viral that people have found our community through on a bunch of platforms. It doesn't even matter what they are, but we're to the point. We are to the point in our awareness where people are maladaptive daydreamers are stumbling across it. They're not looking for it. It just shows up on their dash. And I cannot imagine what that is like. I searched for years for my people. And eventually I found them. I cannot imagine what it's like to just not even be looking and have it just come out of left field and like punch you in the face.
That would be weird. That's a surreal experience.
Did you look for it, Levi, or did you just find it?
You know, for the longest time, I think it was probably about 2 or 3 years, I typed stuff into Google like, I have a whole world in my mind, or um,
Well, that's something to type into Google. Just trying to
yeah, it was
imagine.
like this. I have this fictional world in my mind, or something like that. And I think I got like some results when I was a bit younger, probably around 17 or 18, and I shot it down. I was like, "What do you mean this is a mental health thing? Like, what are you saying? This is offensive to me." I went through that whole phase where everything was offending me. But when I got older, I think was it last year or the year before that, I saw it again, and I forgot that I've seen it already, but I retyped into Google. I have this fantasy world in my head, or I imagine myself in fantasy scenarios or something like that, and that is how I found the Wild Minds forum. And then I was like, okay, well, you know what? I I relate to some of the stuff that's being said here, so maybe this is what I have. And yeah, I just I that's when I started my own YouTube channel, and I was like, this thing, like I need to find other people like me, because I also grew up telling my mother, I think I'm crazy. There's I'm talking to people, and people don't have the same experiences that I have, and they think I'm weird, and so
Hmm.
yeah, that's how I found it, at least.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't know you were on YouTube actually, so I'll keep an eye
Uh,
out.
I
Actually,
need to upload again.
Yeah, me too. I think though, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're over the hour mark for after this gets edited down, which is fine. I don't care how long it goes. But
Yeah.
we should probably think about wrapping it up.
I just
yeah.
have one more thing to add, though, and that is the other thing that makes this documentary. so hard hitting is just because, when you watch it as a maladaptive daydreamer, you're sort of hit with these truths, like what maladaptive daydreaming is. I don't know if you guys experience it that way, but for me, like as Jess and Agatha spoke, I was like, damn, this is this is some harsh truth, that I never I was sort of in denial about, probably, with when it came to MD, like how it affects me really. I can say all of these things, like, yeah, I don't it interferes with my life and I don't like it when it does that and whatnot, but they really got to the core emotional effect that MD has, and it was quite difficult to be faced with that. So yeah, that's my final take of the documentary. It was just it hit a little close to home, but it was good to see it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of summarizing it. Yeah, I think the same. Yeah, just seeing it in that format, it's enough to read it online. But when you see it, like somebody sits down and they talk about it, and they sort of have detailed what, like, I don't know, like there's some things that they were saying about how their experience, their isolation, things like that. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I completely agree. It's a very necessary short film, and I think it has a special place in the MD community. Yeah, I mean, I'm yeah, I'm not sure. I think we were down this debate anyway whether you would show it to someone, but I mean, just for us, it's interesting just to process how other people experience MD, and I think yeah, I really enjoyed watching it. And fair play to the 14 different people I think who were involved with the production of it, which I was quite surprised with. And I mean, I'd love to see something else, some more visual content about maladaptive daydreaming and what other people kind of go through. Thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
I had a slightly different takeaway. I don't feel like I faced any harsh truths or anything like that in this. For me it was more um the validation of it.
All
Mm.
right.
Yeah, like it didn't make me realize like, oh yeah, like that's me. I need to face that because I'm already there. I'm already there. But it did make me feel like like yeah, me too. And seeing it on display in a way that I can't display it to other people, seeing words and thoughts and feelings that I have but can't articulate in that kind of way being shown. That
Yeah.
yeah. I walked away more validated, I think, than inspired. I think that's the wrong word, but it's the one I'm going with because I can't think of another one.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bailey, you're in luck because Thomas Thomas Renckens, the director, has been picked up for a feature-length maladaptive daydreaming documentary, and he is currently looking for maladaptive daydreamers to interview for it. Not to be in the documentary yet, that will come later. Right now, he's building his concept and doing background research. But he needs to talk to a bunch of maladaptive daydreamers, get a bunch of experiences, hear a bunch of experiences, so that he can I don't know, come up with a direction or whatever artists do.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, I'll put a link to his call for participation in the description so that anyone in the audience who would like to contact him to share your experience for the feature length film or a book. He's actually working on a book as well, with Somer, I think. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, if you want to contact him to share your experience, link will be in the description.
Yeah. Fair play to Thomas. What's his surname? Thomas
Renckens.
Thomas Frankens, is it? Is that, oh, Rankins.
Renck.
Some
Renckens, yeah.
Don't want to get his name wrong. Yeah, fair play. I think he's leading that. the march in that direction, isn't he?
Right. So that was it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed. If you would like to keep up with our episodes and what we record in the future, listen to, what we talk about, the topics, the guests that come onto the podcast, please feel free to subscribe to the channels or to follow whichever platform you're on. If you would like to be on the podcast as a guest, or even if you would just like to sit in while we record as an audience member, then feel free to join the Discord server and then give yourself the podcast role, and then you can do so. We usually post our episode topics and what we're going to talk about. If there's anything to read beforehand or watch beforehand, we usually tell people well in advance. And again, thanks for your time. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Cheers.